Hello, my friend. Welcome to my channel. My name is Ann. Today is Friday, and on Fridays, I take a deep dive into a book or an author and his or her work. Today, I chose Ann Petry. Ann Petry was an African American author who was very famous in the 40s and the 50s. First, I will talk about the street and the narrows, and then I will take a little dive into the life of Ann Petry. The Streets is a book that blew me away. It shattered me. It is the reason why I love reading. This is the book. The Street is about Ludi Johnson. Ludi Johnson is a young, beautiful African American woman who has a son, Bub, B-U-B, Bub. And she left her marriage. She was married to Jim, and Jim was, at the beginning when they met, a young, ambitious, full of life guy. But because he couldn't find a job anywhere, he kind of crumbled away. And she had to go to work. She had to work as a sort of maid for a white family that hated her guts. And she had to cook and clean and wash and do everything for very little money. So that kept her away from her family. And when she came back after a couple of months, Jim was not the Jim she knew. So she leaves the marriage with Bob and goes to Harlem, New York, where she decides to live on 116th Street. The street is also a character in this book. And this is what she says about the street. She describes the wind playing with the street. It did everything it could to discourage the people walking along the street. It found all the dirt and dust and grime on the sidewalk and lifted it up so that the dirt got into their noses, making it difficult to breathe. The dust got into their eyes and blinded them, and the grit stung their skins. It wrapped newspaper around their feet, entangling them until the people cursed deep in their throats, stamped their feet, kicked at the paper. The wind blew it back again and again until they were forced to stoop and dislodge the paper with their hands. And then the wind grabbed their hats, pried their scarves from around their necks, stuck its fingers inside their coat collars, and blew their coats away from their bodies. Beautiful, huh? So Ludi is forced to take a little apartment on 116th Street in Harlem. And she has to go out to work and to make a living for her and Bub. And she has to leave Bub alone quite often. He is scared alone in the dark, and she finds it really hard to live with that. And the longer they live in 116th Street, the more they come across horrible scenes. So at a certain point, a man gets shot. People are gathering around him as she is walking along the sidewalk with Bub. She noticed one particular thing, his shoes. But the thing she had never been able to forget were his shoes. Only the uppers were intact. They had once been black, but they were now a dark, dull grey from long wear. The soles were worn out. There were mere flaps attached to the uppers. She could see the layers of wear. The first outer layer of leather was left near the edges, and then the great gaping holes in the center where the leather had worn out entirely, so that for weeks he must have walked practically barefooted on the pavement. She had stared at the shoes, trying to figure out what it must have been like to walk barefooted on the city's concrete sidewalks. She wondered if he ever went downtown, And if he did, what did she think about when he passed store windows filled with sleek furs and fabulous food and clothing made of materials so fine you could tell by looking at them they would feel like sea foam under your hand? How did he feel when the great long cars snorted past him as he waited for the lights to change? Or when he looked into a taxi and saw a delicate, soft, beautiful woman lifting her face toward an opulently dressed man? The woman's hair would gleam and shine. Her mouth would be knowingly shaped with lip rouge, and the concrete would have been rough under this man's feet. It is a beautiful story in the sense that not only it is very well written, it talks about how difficult it is for a young woman raising up a kid alone with no help from family. It talks about how a beautiful young woman is used and abused, how men take advantage of her. They, instead of giving her pay, they give her useless gifts. How men want more from her and they expect to be given that what they want. So it is more and more difficult for her to keep her own dignity, to do what's right for Bub, to give him a future. And the problem is that Bub is male, and she knows deep in her heart that it will be very difficult for him to find a job. And then the end will blow you away. It is so, so heartbreaking. Oh, this is a book that took a place, a very important place in my heart. And yeah, it's so powerful, so beautifully written, so vividly written. This is a book that should never be forgotten. It is still very real, very real. So the next book I want to talk about is The Narrows. Unfortunately, I can't read something aloud from it because as you can see, this is the Dutch version. This is also a very powerful book. It is written in 1953. There's another book in between, but that is not yet available in my country. I've pre-ordered it. It will be out somewhere in January, so I will definitely buy it and talk about it. The Narrows talks about a young man who works as a barman, and he at a certain point while he's walking around in the Narrows, it's a cold, misty day, and there's a woman running who is chased by a creepy guy, and he steps in and he chases the man away, and they decide to go for a drink. And when they go to the bar, he only then sees that the woman is white and that she is dressed beautifully, and clearly she is very rich. But still, something happens between the two of them and they fall madly in love. Problem is, she is very wealthy. She's from a very wealthy family, living uptown New York. And he is a poor guy, and they try to see each other as much as possible. But when more and more people realize that they are in a relationship, the trouble begins, and people are jealous, angry, envy, envious, I mean. So racism in that context comes from both sides. Black people feel betrayed because he lets himself be involved with a very wealthy white woman. So he's a bit of the plantation stud. And that's what he calls himself, the plantation Negro. And yeah, she has a big secret. And when all comes out, things go very bad quickly. And yeah, it's just as powerful as the street. I can't tell too much about it. I can't tell what the secret is or what happens. You have to find it out. But if you have liked this, what I've read to you from the street, the Narrow is just as good. Now, why did Ann Petry, who was born in 1980, I'm sorry, 1908, she died in 1997, I believe. Why does hardly anybody speak about her? Well, she hated the fame. So she was a very private person. She was married. She had one daughter, and she preferred to be only with them. So she moved back from New York to Connecticut, where she was born and raised. Her father was actually a guy that overcame racism, and he had his own pharmacy. She studied to be a pharmacist and worked for her father, and then during her free time, she started writing short stories, and then, of course, she also wrote The Street. I will end with the last paragraph of The Street. The snow fell softly on the street. It muffled sound. It sent people scurrying homeward, so that the street was soon deserted, empty, quiet. And it could have been any street in the city, for the snow laid a delicate film over the sidewalk, over the brick of the tired old buildings, gently obscuring the grime and the garbage and the ugliness. See you on Sunday for my weekly Sunday coffee clutch. Bye bye.